All right. So the goal of this brief session is to try to recreate the forest plot we did earlier in class, but this time using Windows. So here I've copied the data we had from the Google form or Google Sheets to this form here. So we have 4 columns. The first is the study name. The second is the incidence rate ratio. The third and the fourth columns represent the lower and the upper confidence intervals. So our goal is to create a forest plot, as we saw earlier in class. Now, the first step is for us to sort the data. As you can see here, the column B, which is our incidence rate ratios, are very haphazard. They are not well ordered. And it's always a great idea to sort the data because visually it's just more striking when our incidence rate ratios are ascending or descending in a very graduated manner. So for that reason, we're going to sort this first. So that's step number 1, sort the data. So we select the whole sheet by Control A, and then we come to here where you have the funnel that says sort and filter, and we're going to select custom sort. Notice that I have created my table such that it is on the very first row. That makes it just easier for us to sort it that way. I want to make sure that I select that my data has headers. If I don't select that, it's going to read the first row, which is the header, as an actual value. And so all of this will be read as string. And that makes no sense because this is actually numeric values. So let's go ahead and select my data has headers. Next, I want to sort by the incidence rate ratio. And I want to sort in the order of smallest to largest. You can also choose largest to smallest. That's a personal preference. So that's how I want my graph to appear. So sort from smallest to largest, and then I can click on OK. So now I have my graph sorted. As you can see here, the incidence rate ratios now range from 0.88 and increase all the way to 1.45. So task number 1 has been completed. So let's write that down here as tasks. Oops. Number 1 was to sort the data sets in increasing or decreasing order of the incidence rate ratios. So that task has been completed. The next thing for us to do is to add some additional columns that we will need to create our graph. So first things first, let's create our counter. That counter is important because it's going to serve as a y-axis for all the data elements we will need to add to our plot. If you can visualize this data as a figure, we will need an indicator, a y column that allows all of these study names to be arranged from top to bottom. So that's what the counter does. It allows us to create a column that will serve as a y-axis for our graph. So to do that, we'll come down to the bottom. Make sure you come down to the bottom. Type 1, 2, 3. And that's just to tell Excel the sequence in which we want it to increment. Then go ahead and select the 3 cells you have imputed. Now at the bottom, you can see a node. Let me expand so you can see the node clearly. That node at the bottom right, that's what we're going to try to grab. So grab that node and pull all the way up. So that tells Excel the direction. See, 4, 5, you can see it's populating the values as we go up, all the way up, right? This allows us to create that vector of values in an automated manner. So step 2 completed, which was create a counter that will serve as the y-axis for our graph. So that is completed. Now, we need to create a series of columns, 2 columns, that will allow us to create the 95% confidence intervals. Well, you might be wondering, but don't we already have the lower and upper confidence intervals already here? Yes, we do. But we need to create them. We need to create a new column that allows us to take this and transform it into a form that we can use in the graph. So essentially what we want to do in the graph is we want to take the point estimate, which is the incidence rate ratio, and want to see by how much extra to the left and to the right do we need to go to create that confidence interval. So we want to increment from the point estimate to the left, which is a lower confidence interval, and to the right. So it's not all the way by 0.77 points. It is the difference between this and this that will have to go to the left to calculate or to visualize the lower confidence interval. The same thing with the upper confidence interval. We're not going all the way 1.01 points to the right. We're going from this point, we're going between the difference of this and this to the right. And that's how we're going to visualize the upper confidence interval. So for visualization purposes, we have to create an indicator of how much we have to go to the left for the lower confidence interval or to the right for the upper confidence interval. So let's create two extra columns here. Let's call this LCI, which is the lower confidence interval, and UCI, which is the upper confidence interval. For the LCI, we're going to calculate this as the difference between the incidence rate ratio, so equals to this minus this. In other words, this is equal to, we're saying take the incidence rate ratio and subtract from it the lower confidence interval. Whatever we get is how much to the left of the point estimate we have to go to visualize the lower confidence interval. The same thing applies to the upper confidence interval. We're going to take the upper confidence interval and subtract from it the point estimate. And that's telling the computer that this is how many points to the right of the point estimate you have to go to visualize the upper confidence interval. So we have calculated the margin for the lower confidence interval as well as the margin for the upper confidence interval. Now, we just have to now apply this formula to the entire rows. So select both of them. We grab the node at the bottom and we select all the way here. So now we have finished that task. So let's add step 3. Compute the margins to be used to calculate, or let's rather say to visualize the lower and upper confidence intervals. So that is done, check. Number 4, we have to create the null value in terms of where it's going to be positioned on our graph. So let's call this null. And since we're talking about incidence rate ratio, in any ratio, the null value is 1. So we're going to create 1 and apply it to all the rows. Again, just type 1 in the first row, click on that node here and just double click on it. And it's going to apply that value to all the remaining rows. Next, we want to create a special position where we're going to display our confidence intervals, right? And we want to allow some buffer room between where the most extreme upper confidence interval ends and where we want to position the display. So if we look at our upper confidence intervals here, the crude ones, the most extreme one is around 1.75. So how about we place the confidence intervals at position 3, which gives enough breathing room between the most extreme value and where we want to position the labels. So let's go ahead and put here as position of CI. This is just where we're going to position the placement of the labels. We're going to put that position 3. And again, just type in 3 and double click to apply that to all of them. Now, one last thing we have to do, we have to display the incidence rate ratios and the confidence interval together. So let's call this incidence rate ratios and 95% CI. And we're going to paste the value of the incidence rate ratios with the 95% confidence intervals. Essentially, this is how we want it to look like. XX, the lower interval LL to upper. So this is essentially what we want to create. A scenario where we'll take the point estimate here, and we're going to put a bracket around it, and then we'll pick the lower limit, we'll put a dash, and then we'll pick the upper limit, and then we'll end with a bracket. That's what we want to create here. So let's benchmark this so that we can see how we create that. So we're going to say equal to, every Excel formula starts with equal. So equal to, we're going to pick the point estimate by just clicking on it. Then we're going to put and this, then that space, hit to create a space. We'll put the opening bracket. We'll put a double quote and we'll pick the lower limit by clicking here. We'll separate that by this. Then we'll put the dash. Then we'll put the upper limit, but first we'll put the double quote and we'll pick the upper limit, and then we'll separate it, and then we'll put the ending bracket, and that will be it. So this is what we have created. So you can see that this follows the format we have created here. This was just for visualization purposes. So now we can now apply to the rest of the rows by clicking on the node at the bottom and double clicking on it, and that adds everything here. So now we have created all the elements we need for our visualization. The last thing we need to do now is to insert an empty row between the study name and the variable names and the actual data. So let's put a row in between there. We insert a row there. So let's put the next step as step 4. Insert an empty row between the column names and the actual data. So which is what we have done. Now we are ready to start creating our graph. To create our graph, first we will select the data, just the names here. Just select the names only, nothing else. Come to insert, come to this figure here, the column chart you see there. Click on it. Now, what we want to do is come to the 2D bars and select the one in the middle, the start bar, which has uneven bars, right? So we click on that. This creates something like this. Let's move this out of our way. Make sure you position your graph somewhere it's not going to interfere with the data so you can see everything clearly. So let's move this completely clear of our data. All right, so this is what we want. Let me move it to, So now we have all the names here. This is exactly what you should have at this point. All the names are here. And we want to come up here, switch rows and columns, because in our forest plot, we want the names not to be at the top, but to be by the side. So let's switch rows and columns so that it flips it such that the names move from being at the top to being by the side. So switch rows and columns. So now we have done that. We have one name only here, which is exactly what we want. The next step is to make sure that not just one name appears, but all the names appear. So to do that, we come here and we now have to start adding the data points. So this is the sequence in which we're going to add the data points. We'll first add the names, then we're going to add the odds ratios, then we're going to add the null values and then the rest of the other elements into the visualization. To add a data point is very simple. Just right-click inside the chart area and click on Select Data. So once we do that, this brings us to this box here, where we have two boxes here, really. The first one on the left says Legend Entries, and this is the series. The next one here says Axis Labels. So in other words, the one on the left here is the actual data point, the series, whereas here is the label. So one is talking about the actual data, the other one is talking about the label. So we're going to edit both the one on the left and the one on the right. So first of all, let's edit the actual values. So let's click on edit. The series name, we can call this study name by just clicking there. The series values. What are the values? Remember, we want to place all of these names such that they correspond with the y-axis. And what are the values for our y-axis? Well, it is our counter. Our counter is what is serving as the y-axis. So for this time, we're going to make sure that we select the counter, but one empty row above all the way to one empty row below. This is the only time we're going to do that, right? For the names on the axis, we're going to make sure that both the y-axis and the x-axis are selected such that we select one empty row above all the way down to one empty row below. And this is just special for these names only. For all the other entries we're going to be adding, we're going to select just the exact data points. So we're going to OK this. So we have edited the values on the y-axis. But what we do to the left, we also have to do to the right for symmetry to exist. So now we need to come to these labels. So remember what we have just done is edit the values, the y-axis. Now we have to come to the x-axis and also edit the names. If you're editing the values, you must edit the labels as well. Otherwise, there won't be balance. So we have to edit this side too. And then we have to apply the same treatment we applied to the y-axis. Remember, we selected one above all the way to one below. So we're going to do the exact same thing here, and we will OK it. And then we can then click the second OK. So now we have our graph like this. So now you can see that it's beginning to appear like a forest plot, but there are some issues. One, we see that Adams et al. Is the first name here, but on our graph, Adams et al. Appears at the bottom. So that means that we have to flip the name such that the one at the bottom gets all the way to the top. So to do that, we will just select the element we want to edit, which is this names, right click on it. So again, select that, make sure you right click on it and click on format axis. So what exactly do we want to do? We want to make sure that the categories are in reverse order so that Adams et al., which is at the bottom, goes the way to the top. So click on categories in reverse order, right? And so we also want to click at maximum category. But before we do that, let's just see what clicking on this creates. So if we click on this axis and reverse categories in reverse order, let me move this out of the way. Let's see what that does. So, oops, sorry. So let's again, right click on this format axis. So categories in reverse order and at maximum category. So what happens is it has flipped such that the Adams et al. Noun is at the top as we want it to be, and Zhang et al. Is at the bottom. Now, one more thing we want to do is to make sure that we want to bring these labels, which are at the top, to the bottom. Because right now, let me bring this graph to the side. All right, so, and that is what has happened here. So let's explain that part again so that we're all clear on what happened. So to do that, let me undo the change so that we can repeat it again for clarity. So let me undo the change. So this is what we had. So again, we formatted axis. We selected categories in reverse order. And we selected at maximum category. So selecting categories in reverse order ensure that Adams et al. Went to the top, just as we have it here. And selecting at maximum category brought the numbers we had, which were previously at the top, all the way to the bottom. So again, that's what you have to do to make sure that you have this kind of figure. Now, we want to add the odds, the incidence rate ratio to the plot now. So to do that, we're going to select here, and again, right click and say select data. Now we have to add a new data point because we're not editing anymore. We just edited the study name, but now we don't have any data point for the incidence rate ratio. So let's go ahead and add a new data point. Let's call this the incidence rate ratio. The name is the incidence rate ratio. So since it's here, let's select that to assign that as a name. For now, we won't do anything yet. Let's just say okay. We will not touch anything for now. Let's just say okay for now. And the reason why we just okayed it without doing anything is to come and inspect what we have created so far. Right now, it's appearing like a bar. We don't want it appearing like a bar. So we click on that bar, and we want to, the goal is to change it from a bar to a scatter plot. So we can come here to chart design, and right here we see change chart type. We select that, and we want to change this incidence rate ratio from a stacked bar to something of a scatter plot. So let's select under XY scatter. Let's select this one here. And that's fine. So let's okay it. So it's now appearing like a single solitary scatter. That's fine. Dot. So now we want to go back and edit that data point so that it includes not just one, but all of the values. So again, we're going to click in the middle, right click, select data. Now we want to edit. We're not creating a new one. We just want to edit the incidence rate ratio. So we select it and click on edit. The name is already there. The x-axis are the values here. Now, this time around, we're not selecting one above. We're selecting just the exact data point we need. Just the exact. The y values are always the counter. So we will select the counter here from 15 all the way down to the bottom. And we're going to okay that. And we're going to okay this. So now we see it's a bit off because it's not exactly on the point. So what we can do is click on this axis again and format the axis so that we want to select this point here on tick marks. We want this to appear exactly on the tick. So let's select on tick mark. So now you can see it's appearing exactly on the tick. And we can go ahead and close this for now. This is getting in our way, the blue bars, we don't need them anymore. So let's really go ahead and remove them. And we're removing them by just hiding them. So we're going to hide the color. If you want to format anything in Excel, you just select that and then right click to format it. So format data series. And what we want to format is the color. It's still going to be there, but we're going to hide it by making the color invisible, both the fill color and the boundary color. So we're going to come to fill and say no fill. We'll come to border and say no line. So right now it's there, but it's invisible, which is exactly what we want. Next, we want to add our confidence intervals. Let's close this so that we have enough room. We want to add our confidence intervals to the plot. So since the confidence intervals are going to be added to this dot, we click the dots to indicate that that is where we want to add them. And we come right here to add chart elements, and we select error bars. We want to add standard errors. Now, we have a little problem here. The plot has only added the vertical error bars, but in a forest plot, the error bars or the confidence intervals are supposed to be horizontal, not vertical. So to correct this, what we need to do is we'll come to format. We'll come to this little box here. It's very easy to miss this. So we're going to come to this little drop-down menu here, select it, and what we need to do is select X error bars, right? X error bars are the same thing as horizontal error bars. So click there. Now, it hasn't taken hold yet. We still need to make a little change. So make sure we come here and want to format the error bars and make sure that we select custom. So immediately you select custom, you see that it's going to immediately display the horizontal error bars in addition to the vertical error bars that were existing. Now, before we do any further change, let's go ahead and delete those vertical error bars. So select that and click on delete. It's going to delete all of them. So now we have our error bars in place. But remember that we have not customized them yet. They are just the same size for all the points. So we want to actually provide the actual values that correspond to them. And this is where these values come in. Those values that we're creating as margins to the left and to the right. So we're going to specify them now. So we're going to click on this error bars now and scroll all the way to the bottom where it says custom. And now we're going to specify the value. So click on specify value. The first value we have to specify is the positive error bars, which is the upper limit. So we are going to select all of this from the first to the last. The next is the negative error bar, which is the lower limit. We're going to select the lower CI from here to the last. And then we're going to OK it. So now it has applied the actual confidence intervals to our data. But it looks very small. And the reason why it looks very small is because this scale is extraordinarily large. So let's format this scale so that it reflects the actual magnitude of the data points we have. So format axis. It runs from 0 to 16. Let's make it run from 0 to, let's say, 5. We've entered that. So now we can see that the confidence intervals have become slightly more visible. These lines are getting in our way, this vertical line. So let's just click on them, on any one to select all of them, and we can delete them. So now we have some more clean white space. Next, we want to provide, we want to insert the null value, which is at 1. So to do that, we're going to, again, click inside the box, right-click, select data. We're going to add a new point because we're adding a new data point now. So click on add. The data point we're adding is the null value. The X value ranges from the first here all the way to the last. Let me move this out of the way so we can see clearly. Unfortunately, I have to cancel before I can move it. So, but that's fine. Let's move this out of the way so we can see what's happening. All right, let me repeat that process. So to add the null value, we clicked inside the box so that we have the square. We right-clicked on it and we say select data. We add the data point. The name is the null. The X values are all of the ones from the first to the last. The Y values are always the counter. So we're going to say select from here all the way to the bottom. And we're going to OK it. And we're going to OK it here too. And so here we have it's a bit of a lag on my computer for whatever reason. All right, but here we have, see the green point. We don't want it as points or markers, we want it as lines. So we're going to select this here and we're going to format it. So right-click to format data series. So here we have the color and all of that. So you can select these options here because what we want to do is to make the color invisible. So under the marker, we're going to say that we don't want any fill and we don't want any borderline. So it's going to appear invisible. And instead we want a line. We want a solid line. And the color of the line should be, let's say we want to use black as a color. And the width of the line, let's make it less thicker. Let's say 0.75. And the type of line in terms of dash, let's use this long dashes. And that is how we have inserted our null value here. The next is for us to insert an area here, somewhere here, where we can put the actual values for what this corresponds to. So we're going to, again, repeat that same process. We click there, we right-click, we select data, we add, now we're adding a new data point here by click add. The series name, we're going to call this position CI. The X values will be all of these three from beginning to the end. The Y values, again, is always the counter. So from, move this out of the way, from here to here. And we okayed. And we okayed here. So we have this here. Now, this is blue. We want it to be invisible, really. So what we're going to do is marker, we're going to say no fill, no line. So when you look at it, it's almost as if there's nothing there. But let's put the labels there now. Let's click on it. You have to click blindly until you get it, because it's not there. Oh, sorry, it was at 3 rather. So we're going to make sure we click until we get what we're looking for. Aha. So now we can right click on it and say add data labels. So let's add data labels. So it has added the data labels that corresponded to the counter from 1 to 15. But that's not exactly what we want. The data labels we actually want here, instead of that 1 to 15, are these ones here. This is what we want to appear as data labels instead, not the default values. So we will have to format that. So let's click on the data labels that are existing currently. And instead of displaying the Y value, we will uncheck that. Let's allow to display value from cells. And the values are these ones here, this to this. And we okay that. And just like that, we have our values displayed that correspond to this. Next, let's quickly add some few elements and we're done. Let's add the labels here to indicate that these are the incidence rate ratios. So we'll come here to chart design. We'll add chart element. What we want is axis titles. Now remember that we switch rows and columns. So this is actually the horizontal axis, and this is actually the vertical axis, because remember the very first step we did was to switch rows and columns. So now that we want to add a label here, we will have to select primary vertical. That sounds counterintuitive, but we have to remember that we switched at the beginning. So here we're going to type incidence rate ratios. Now we don't need secondary axis, so we can go ahead and delete it by clicking on it and hitting on delete. And we can then make changes to the cosmetic appearance of this element as we need. So for example, if we wanted to change the size of the markers, we can come here, marker options. We can select built-in. If we don't want the cycle, we can say select other options that have been built in. Let's say we want the plus. We can change the size as we want. We can change the color. So if we want solid fill, we can say, give me a color like, let's say, brown. And it will be modified accordingly. So you can play with it as you want. You can change the color of the size of the font and the appearance of the font. My favorite font is Tahoma, so I always use that everywhere. And so essentially that's how you create a poor man's version of a forest plot. We call it the poor man's version because, you know, if you don't have the resources to buy sophisticated software or you don't know how to code, well, you can use this quick and dirty method to still create a forest plot for your visualization. All right, I hope you enjoyed the session, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.